and welcome to What a Scream. This is the podcast where I, your host, Miss Dolly, chats with special guests about horror movies. And in particular, we chat about certain movies that have to do with a certain subject or theme that I have previously chosen at random. So we do discuss these films in spoilerific detail and we dissect them and then try and figure out which one we prefer over the other. So this week is another reoccurring guest. I had them on the podcast before chatting about Dracula, where we covered 1931's Dracula and Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And this week we are chatting about another gothic horror novel. It is Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. So it's an 1818 novel by Mary Shelley, in which Victor Frankenstein creates a creature through a science experiment. The first edition was published anonymously in 1818, with the second edition with the author's name attached being published in 1821. Now, previous to writing the novel, Shelley travelled a lot through Europe, stopping in Germany a short while away from Frankenstein's castle, which was where rumours of an alchemist who performed a lot of experiments. There was kind of rumours about someone about 200 years previously. So this was in about 1816. Herself, her future husband Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, and the doctor John Polidori held a writing competition to see who could come up with the scariest story. So Shelley kind of won it. She kind of beat all the boys, hands down, although John Polidori did come up with the story Vampire. So it she beat the boys at their own game, which was great. This is one of the reasons why I love Frankenstein so much. It was a gothic novel she came up with, but it could be said that it was the very first science fiction novel, and I love that. I absolutely adore Frankenstein, and I love Mary Shelley, so much so that I have a Frankenstein tattoo, because that's how big into Frankenstein I am. It is a frame story which is written in epistolary form, which means a frame story is like a story within a story, and it is written as a series of documents, so letters, diary entries, etc., etc. We've got three viewpoints within the story. We've got Captain Walton's intro narrative. He writes letters back to his sister telling her of the stranger he meets on a voyage. And then we've got Victor Frankenstein's narrative, who is the stranger. And then we've got the creature's narrative. So a little bit of a background on Shelley. Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, died in labour, and she was very close to her father, William Godwin, until he remarried, and his new wife basically made him choose between his children from his previous marriage, and his new children, and he chose his new children, unfortunately. So we see parental rejection in Shelley's life, and you can see that mirrored in the novel Frankenstein. We have a lot of themes of parental rejection there as well. She ran away to France with Percy Shelley to marry him because her father didn't approve of the marriage, because Percy Shelley was an older gentleman. And along with them went her stepsister Claire Claremont. Shelley gave birth and she lost her first child, and she suffered a lot of losses. And then Percy left Mary to have an affair with her stepsister Claire. So we kind of see a lot of themes in Frankenstein that mirror Mary Shelley's real life, with the parental rejection, kind of feeling a little bit like an outcast, and also that, at the end of the day, it's the people that are the real monster. And I'm sure we will go into more details of the themes of Frankenstein with my guest. So I better introduce them. It is Elaine Pascale. As I said, she was on the podcast before chatting about Dracula. She is a horror writer, an academic, and we discussed two Frankenstein films. Staying true to form, I picked the Universal Frankenstein film, starring Boris Karloff as the creature, and Elaine chose Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, which is very interesting. If you haven't seen it, I would almost recommend it for you just to watch. If you like Kenneth Branagh running around half naked a lot. So here it is, my chat with Elaine Pascale. I would like to welcome back to the podcast, Elaine Pascale. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me back.
Of course. I had such a great time last time chatting about Dracula and Gothic literature that I knew we had to make this a bit of a series.
Yes.
Definitely. So how have you been doing? What have you been up to? What have you been watching? Anything?
Well, besides this Frankenstein, I'm trying to think what I've really not been watching very much because I've been forcing myself to do some writing.
Oh, nice.
Okay. When I get sucked into my TVs and movies, I don't do quite as much. So it's actually my husband who's been inspiring me because he's been doing things at night, and I look at him and I think he's being productive. Down the bag of potato chips and be productive too.
Well, you can still have the potato chips. I'd be like one hand in the potato chips, one hand doing something else. So the last time we talked, I actually took up a bit of your advice and I started Penny Dreadful. Yes. So I'm on the 3rd season at the moment. So I am actually loving it.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
It's gorgeous. I mean, aesthetically, it's amazing. It was set in Dublin, so I'm like, I know where that is. The clothes are amazing. Like, I even made myself a Victorian walking skirt so I could do a Vanessa cosplay.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
So I did that. But you know what I love the most about it is how they intertwine all the classic characters. And it's not forced. It's so natural.
And their Frankenstein is so much better than what we watch, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, I think we should discuss that after we've discussed the two movies. I just
done a good job with it.
Oh, just perfect. But yes, so I'm on the 3rd season. It's a little bit slower than the other ones.
I was going to say the 3rd's my least favorite.
Yeah. But sure, we'll see.
Glad you're watching that.
Yeah. So have you been listening to anything, or what are you writing about? Are you writing another book, or can we be privy to it?
I am. It's something I've been working on for a long time. And I'm finally just like, you know what? Either shit or get off the pot with this. Like either finish it and whatever may be, or just walk away from it. But just like every once in a while, dribbing and drabbing with it, just sit down and do it. So I've been really cracking the whip.
Yeah. And do you feel that perhaps the lockdown and everything that's happened in this past year, has it put a dampener on your creativity, or do you think it has kind of enhanced it and motivated it a bit more?
That's a good question. See, I'm not that prolific of a writer to begin with. I have friends who are far more prolific than I am. I'm quite envious of them.
Yeah.
So my output's probably pretty steady. I'm in a very fortunate position in that I was asked to join two different, one is we do a monthly flash fiction where they give us a picture and we have to write about it, and they give you like a couple days deadline, like just go ahead and write whatever comes to your mind, a horror story. And then I belong to another one too called Pen of the Damned, and those sort of force me to but I'm getting a little sluggish. It's like okay, so, these little short things to kind of put out and feel
Yeah, I feel that as well. Like I go through weeks and weeks and weeks where I'm just so sluggish and I'm so like, everything sucks. But then all of a sudden it's like I get a little burst and I have to be like, it's almost maniacal in my creativity. I'm like, I gotta do this, and this. And I produce so much.
Frankenstein.
That's it, exactly. Like I heard, it was in like a documentary I was watching actually about the making of one of the films we're discussing, and one of the guys says, one of the people who's been interviewed said artists are much like Victor Frankenstein, that they are so maniacal that they have such a kind of like tunnel vision when it comes to this piece that they want to create, so that they become maniacal about it, and nothing else matters. And it's kind of a nice way to segue into our so as people have probably guessed, we chose Frankenstein to do. Ooh, we're both rocking our our gear
A
here.
gear.
Yeah. So obviously we've got a lot of films to do with Frankenstein, but it started off from an 18-year-old author called Mary Shelley. And it blows my mind that she was so young when she wrote this, and that, you know, it came about because she was stuck in Switzerland somewhere in Geneva with Percy Shelley, obviously her to-be husband, Lord Byron, and a doctor. Let me find his name. Where is his name? No, I can't find it. Oh, wait, there it is. Yes, Lord Byron.
John Polidori.
That's it, John Polidori. And they had a writing competition.
And her sister, Claire Claremont, who was sleeping with Byron and Shelley.
Of course, as they do. There was also rumors that Mary Shelley was sleeping with Lord Byron as well, and that one of her children may have been fathered by him. It's a bit sordid.
I would doubt that. I've read her diaries and
oh really?
I would doubt that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's all just rumor then. But yeah, they had a competition about who could come up with the scariest ghost story, and herself and the doctor John Polidori actually came up with these stories. She obviously came up with Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, and he came up with the vampire, or vampire, however you want to pronounce it. So yeah, obviously you've read Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. What do you think of it?
I think it's amazing. I mean, it's really the beginning of science fiction.
Yeah.
And apparently Percy Shelley got his fingers in it, and the boring parts are attributed to him. There are really slow, backgroundy parts, and I think he added those. She sort of was the, it's a Lord, that whole part of it. And it's, to me, it's such a sad story because, as I said, I'm very familiar with her diaries and things. And she has such an issue with abandonment and loss and losing her mother. Her mother died like a month after she was born, losing many children. She had many children who later on to die, had many miscarriages. And she even talks about in her diaries about dreaming about like warming the babies in front of the fire and bringing them back to life. So there's a lot of there's just such a sadness to the story with the monster just feeling like, why did you make me just to walk away from me? It's really, you can look at that as parent-child, you can look at that as God-human, but it's just, it's a very sad story.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people kind of look at Frankenstein, the story, and think that it's about, man shouldn't play God and you shouldn't go against the laws of nature. Whereas the way I've read it is I associate a lot with the monster, as I'm sure a lot of people do, because the monster experienced parental rejection. And, the monster didn't ask to be created. It didn't ask to be brought into the world. But when it was, and Victor rejects him because he's horrifying, and, he doesn't start off as a monster. He doesn't have murderous thoughts. He's very naive. He's very childlike.
He wants friends. He wants to be loved.
Yeah, he wants to learn. But Victor rejects him straight off the bat. And that is what creates the monster. And then as the story goes on, we see more cases of rejection because of the way he looks, because of the way he was made, because of the way he naturally is. He gets rejected. And by the end of it, he says, you know what? Fuck it. If you think I'm the monster, I'm going to be the monster. And that's when we see the murder and chaos.
Well, you read John Milton's Paradise Lost. In the book, part of his learning English is he read John Milton's Paradise Lost. And Satan is like, I'd rather, reign in hell than be a servant in heaven. It's sort of the monster gets that same sort of thing. Like, well, hey, if I can't be part of this, I'm going to try to destroy it.
So that's why I think I love Frankenstein so much. That, and because Shelley created science fiction, like she literally created that genre. And I love that, you get a lot of thing as a femme or as a woman, and, cis men a lot go, oh, you're fake fan, or you're a fake geek girl. And you're like, well, actually, it was a woman who created the genre. And I love that. So the book came out in about 1818, but she released it under an anonymous writer, and then later re-released it. I think it was about 1831 the revised copy came out, but it became a stage play, as a lot of these Gothic novels do, as we saw with Dracula. The first one was in 1823 that Richard Peake developed, and then in 1927 Peggy Webling wrote another stage show, and this is where we kind of get the first film that I'm going to be talking about, the Universal Frankenstein from 1931. That's where the film was kind of adapted from. So I guess I better start and explore 1931's Frankenstein.
Go right ahead.
So like Dracula, it was a pre-code horror, pre-Hays Code. Its director was James Whale, and as I said, it was adapted from the 1927 play by Peggy Webling. Whale wasn't the original director for it. Another director was brought in first, Robert Florey, and he was very influenced by German Expressionism. And he wanted to create a horror film that had lighting like the German Expressionism, and he wanted it to be pure horror. So unlike the novel, Florey wanted the monster to be completely monstrous, no humanity to him. He just wanted him to be a murdering machine. And originally it was Bela Lugosi who was announced as the creature, but good old Bela thought he was a bit too handsome and a bit too of a good actor to be playing this silent corpse-like creature. So there was a lot of friction, and Robert Florey and Bela Lugosi were kind of kicked out on their ass, and James Whale and Boris Karloff were brought in to be director and the creature. So it opens up with a prologue, funnily enough, and someone comes out from behind a curtain and warns the audience that if they have a nervous disposition, that they probably shouldn't be watching this film, which is hilarious. I love it. What do you think of the prologue? Obviously you laugh there, so you think it's hilarious.
I kind of laughed the whole way through the movie. We'll get to it's not, but I laughed at that, and then they start rolling the credits, and the novel is by Mrs. Percy B. Shelley. It's not even by Mary Shelley. So I'm like, I'm biting my tongue with that one. But yeah, it is. It's like, people are not going to faint over this movie. Come on.
I would love to see, because like when The Exorcist came out and they showed all that footage of like people having hysterics and fainting, I'd love to know whether someone did, or like people did actually, because obviously we watch it now and we're like, oh yeah, it's good makeup, it's great, but it's not like I'm sure there was other horrors going on within that Depression era time that people were like, it's a bit more horrific than just this scary monster. So the film, like Dracula, it flips a lot of the characters. So the creator of the monster is not Victor Frankenstein. He's called Henry Frankenstein, whereas in the novel, Henry is a childhood friend of Victor Frankenstein. It's a bit mixed up there. And we are also given this character called Fritz, who is a hunchback who is not in the novel, and he is Dr. Henry Frankenstein's helper. And it opens up on a gravesite, and there's someone chucking dirt onto a grave, and then we see Fritz and Henry looking for a fresh cadaver from a criminal that had just been hung. And it's quite horrific.
Yeah, that's
to open
a creepy part of the film.
Yeah,
it really is.
Creeping around graveyards and literally taking down a hanging body that, the procession that watched the hanging has just left, and they're like, quick, get it. So we're kind of thrown straight into it. We're given no background on Henry, nothing to how he came to wanting to create a new life. And then we're thrown into kind of his laboratory, which is in a windmill. And it's full of these massive machines, like Tesla coils and big electricity. And he's got this corpse, basically, that he's sewed together, and it's in the machine. And then he sends Fritz off to go find a brain. But Fritz, he asks Fritz to get like a the brain from like a normal kind of person that they're using in the university, but Fritz drops it or accidentally destroys it. So he grabs one from a criminal and he takes that instead. I mean, Fritz is quite the comic. It's funny with Fritz because he's like comic relief, but at the same time, he's quite nasty and he's a horrible character. But yeah. So the scene that we're given where it's the electricity and the electrodes, that actually isn't in the novel at all. That was kind of created by Universal, because in the novel, it's Shelley doesn't tell us much about how the creature's created. She kind of leaves it up to our imagination. You know, it could be alchemy, it could be science, it could be magic. We don't know. And then we've got Henry's fiance, Elizabeth, his friend who is called Victor. It's like, what? And then his old lecturer, professor, who is Dr. Waldman, who is played by Edward Van Sloan, who also played Van Helsing in Dracula. And they come and they actually view him bring this creature to life. And then he says the infamous line that kind of got lost along the way. Victor, his friend, says, "In the name of God," and Henry says, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." And that kind of sets up the whole kind of thing of the film. And obviously from there, we've got the creature, and he's kind of stumbling through this life that, you know, he doesn't quite understand, and plenty of things go wrong. So what do you think of this film as a depiction of Frankenstein?
Well, to me, it's not a depiction of the novel Frankenstein.
Much like the Dracula version, yeah.
It's informed our cultural understanding. And people think that's what the novel is. And people call the monster Frankenstein. Yeah. People don't even realize that Frankenstein's a scientist.
Yeah.
So people think about this big, like, kind of greenish, monster with bolts in the neck that goes,
yeah.
Instead of this articulate creature that looks much more human.
Yeah.
Like, why would you build a monster who's 7 feet tall?
Right.
There's a lot of things that make absolutely no sense. The one thing that really stood out for me in this viewing is just the treatment of the House of Frankenstein and the villagers. Like, let's give them their wedding. Like, it's just so, the class system is just so insulting. Yes,
it really is. Yeah.
And I don't think I picked up on that the first time watching it, but so I mean, it's, again, I used to teach a monsters class, and we would talk a lot about monsters being the other, but also monsters being, like you said, like relating to the monster being us. The students, I would show clips. I would show the clip of the little girl Maria with flowers, and they would laugh. Like, it's not an upset. It should be an upsetting scene, but for a current audience, it's just kind of silly.
Yeah, I've seen this version of Frankenstein countless amount of times, countless. And I was rewatching it there the other day, and that scene actually really got me. For some reason, it's never affected me this badly before, but it really got me because this poor monster, he's just, you know, he finds someone that finally doesn't run away screaming from him. You know, it's this little girl, and she wants to play with him. She's playing with flowers, and it's all very innocent. And he picks her up and he throws her into the pond, and she drowns, obviously. But he doesn't do it.
No, he still thinks it's part of the game.
Yeah, it's through no malice.
Yeah.
And then he realizes what he's done and he runs away. But it's the scene where the father is carrying her through the village and through the festivities. And I could feel like the goosebumps. It just chilled me for some reason. And it was so sad. But yeah, it's just that scene always gets me. And it's just, I think it's such a poignant kind of, it's almost like the turning point of the film, where we see the monster become what the villagers, what society deems as the monster. So that always gets me a lot. And that's
both films, the villagers are so quick to react. Like, it goes from 0 to 100.
Yeah, like this is where we get the phrase, chase them with pitchforks, literally. Like,
where did you get these pitchforks?
You're like, quickly. And also there's a point in the film where, the father finds the little girl. How does he know it's murder? How does he know she just didn't fall into the lake? Like,
and how do they know about the monster? It's weird.
Right? There's a lot of plot holes in this film. But yeah, that scene always gets me. But I also love so the little girl that played Maria in the film, apparently her and Boris Karloff formed quite a friendship, because she was one of like the only actresses that wasn't scared of him in his makeup. Apparently she loved it. She thought it was great, and she loved playing with him. And when they were going to the lake in all the limos, she was like, "Can I ride with you?" Because she just loved him. And
that's cute.
I know. And I kind of love the way that like that scene is a representation of his childlike innocence. And it's also, he became an icon for childlike innocence, and children were really attracted to that kind of, they could almost empathize with this monster, because we're all children. We all have an innocence about this world that we didn't have any choice in coming into. We didn't have any choice on how this world is, but here we are, and we have to navigate it somehow. How did you feel about Colin Clive? Clive Owen's another actor. Colin Clive playing Henry Frankenstein.
I like him. It's Victor Frankenstein's a complex character to play, because he's an asshole. No matter what, like you read the book, you watch it, he's a jerk. You just can't feel any sympathy for him. No. But I felt like he did a good job of capturing like the introverted scientist who, like you said, I mean, it is Prometheus. It's this guy who doesn't realize what he's unleashing, but has such tunnel vision. He can't see to the right or to the left of him. Yeah. So I do like that portrayal of Victor Frankenstein. I thought the acting was good. It's just, again, the monster's not like, because of the buildup with everybody, if you have a heart condition, and then why were we warned? What was going on? That's kind of a letdown. Yeah. Even there are parts in the novel that are so creepy, like when the monster says, "I'll be with you on your wedding night." Like, there's a lot of ways that could be interpreted. Yeah. And that's obviously in this film, because he doesn't speak. Yeah. He just kind of chases Elizabeth around going, "Rrr," like it's kind of a weird growl where you're thinking, maybe he's thinking something, but it's again, I guess I'm a Mary Shelley sympathizer, and it almost makes me sad that this is, when you say Frankenstein, this is what people picture automatically, and they also picture like the Munsters and Herman Munster, and that sort of thing. Like, that's not what her intent was. Yeah, very much so. The Colin Clive was apparently, as a person, he was quite Jekyll and Hyde. He was a big drinker. He was bisexual but closeted. So that played a lot into his kind of mindset. But it kind of seems like he brought all of that trauma to the role. He plays a very maniacal Victor / Henry Frankenstein. And he literally embodied the thing of a mad scientist. That's what we think of now when someone says a mad scientist is someone maniacal and kind of on the verge of a breakdown constantly. And I kind of, the way he treats everybody else is terrible. Like it's terrible, but we all know someone who becomes so involved in their work and either their creativity or their art that they become a monster. And I always read Frankenstein as Victor Frankenstein being Lord Byron. Because of the fact that, he's in love with his sister, as Lord Byron allegedly had a child with his half sister. Yeah. And just that what's the word? Predator. Yeah. The predatory behavior of like, what can I use you for? How can you further my agenda? You're not a person. Yeah. What can you do for me?
Yeah, very narcissistic kind of individual. So let's talk a little bit about Boris Karloff's performance. I adore.
I enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. If it was a standalone film apart from the novel, it'd be great.
Yes.
But I read the novel first, and then I saw this way back in the day. But I adore Boris Karloff because he adored his character. He adored the creature. He even, one of his famous quotes is, "The monster was always my best friend." And apparently he loved the fact that after he was cast as the creature, he became typecast. And unlike a lot of actors who don't like being typecast, he adored it. He was like, it's great. I can perfect my craft. And, I am the creature. And I just...
His name isn't even in the credits. It says the monster ... question mark.
Yeah. And he wasn't doing it for the fame. He did it because he he wanted to be the creature. And apparently he was very instrumental in working with the makeup artist Jack Pierce with creating the look. And because it was all molded around his face, he could really bring some great expressionism to the creature, even though we don't think of expressionism because it's very heavy brow and square, but he brings such pathos to the monster. And I just love it. I love it. What do you think of his performance?
I think you said it perfectly. If this were standalone and not associated with Mary Shelley's creation, I would love it. But there's a little sadness in me that people aren't familiar with what she did.
Yeah.
And instead, this is what Frankenstein is.
Yeah. I mean, like Dracula, this film was instrumental in bringing the iconic Frankenstein look, or the Frankenstein monster's look. But unlike Dracula, the original novel is not as celebrated, which is such a shame because look what it brought us, and it has more depth than Dracula as a novel. It has more metaphors. It has more meaning to it than Dracula, which is a bit of an adventure book. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it is a bit of an adventure book compared to this great work of science fiction, as we said. And I just, like yourself, I'm a little bit heartbroken about it. So another point of this film that I kind of touched on another episode was that it's become kind of this idea of queer coding within the film. What are your thoughts on?
I like interpreting it that way. I really do. That feeling of, why am I different? I was born this way, made this way, whatever. Why am I being rejected for something that's just part of my nature? I like looking at it that way. And I think Mary Shelley would appreciate that interpretation because she was living in this world of, not world, her little social clique was free love and this and that, and everybody was doing everything and everyone and da-da-da. And she kind of wasn't. Percy was really encouraging her to go off and, have sex with this one and experience that one. And she just wanted him.
Yeah.
She really didn't want anybody else. And so again, it was like this almost rejection because she was just a monogamous woman. And she really just wanted his love and his attention and she didn't want. And, so I think that's a part of what she meant too. Like this idea of this is just how I am. And I really just want to be accepted for how I am instead of rejected for it.
Yeah. And I've read as well that she was like a fierce ally as well too. Queer couples to lesbian couples as well. And I really love the way that this film has become, as I say, queer coded because it's about a man wanting to create another perfect man.
The perfect man, yeah.
And, he's not bothered by his fiancée, Elizabeth. He's completely kind of like, you're there to serve a purpose. And that's to almost be like a mask for him. He's seen... It's almost to please his father. He gets married to Elizabeth to please his father. But in reality, he's not bothered. He doesn't really want to. He'd much prefer to work on his man. And and if that's not queer coded, I don't know what is, to be honest. And then we can kind of see it. So obviously in the sequel that was brought about, which was Bride of Frankenstein, which kind of it carries on to what the novel is almost. So in the novel, the creature wants a mate, and he says to Victor, you know, you make the mate and I'll go away, I'll disappear.
To Brazil for some reason.
Yeah, Brazil, because that is like the far reach. Yeah, that's like the far reaches of the world is Brazil, apparently. And so in the Bride of Frankenstein, the sequel to the film, you've got Henry Frankenstein and another mad professor creating life together. Two men creating life together, and that's all they care about. Yeah.
My favorite thing with the Bride of Frankenstein, though, and I don't mean to change the topic, but it always sticks in my head, is that he pulls that lever at the end to blow up. If you were building a lab, why would you include a lever that's going to blow up the lab if you pull it?
It's like when films always have like a big red destruction button. Yeah. You're like, why?
In my house, why would you?
Yes, but
and in the book when the monster asks for a bride, of course in the book he doesn't create a bride because he doesn't want them to reproduce, and I always think, just don't give her a uterus. And then
yeah, you're like, do you know how reproduction happens?
You're the creator.
Yeah. I don't think it would quite happen that way. So from this film we did have quite a few sequels. So we had Bride of Frankenstein, we had Son of Frankenstein, we had House of Frankenstein. So Universal
meets Frankenstein.
Right? Frankenstein meets Wolfman. Bela Lugosi eventually became the creature. He got his wish after playing Igor, who somehow came from Fritz but was now Igor. I don't know. It's like Universal really went running with this. They were like, look at the success now. But yes, would you recommend Frankenstein, the 1931 film?
I would, again, with the caveat that this is not Mary Shelley's novel. I understand that this is something really very separate. I didn't feel that way so much with Dracula, even though Bela Lugosi was in the novel. I think there was enough of the novel in it, but this one I feel like, just understand it's a different story. Yeah.
Like, but please read the novel and then watch it maybe. I'd recommend it just for the same reason as Dracula, that you need to understand where some of our most beloved kind of monsters came from, and like Universal created that icon. And look where it's gone now. Everyone knows basically what the creature, even though they they call them Frankenstein, what the creature looks like. It's kind of become this pop culture icon, perhaps not as big as Dracula, but still, So the next Frankenstein adaptation we're going to talk about was your pick. Would you like to introduce it?
Well, let me preface this.
Okay.
I was on a virtual party last weekend.
Okay, yeah.
Some friends of mine, some writer friends of mine who are all, they're all horror writers, horror fans. And they said, there's about 6 or 7 people on the call. And they said, what are you up to? And I said, I'm watching Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein for a podcast I'm going to be on. And without skipping a beat, all 6 or 7 were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Just as if I'd announced a death in the family. So I'd like to apologize to you because I'd seen it before, but it's an abomination, just like The Creature's an abomination. It is a midlife crisis film. It's just, and I love Kenneth Branagh. He's a talent. I'm not trying to take away from his legacy, but wow. But it is the most faithful to the novel of probably any Frankenstein film. I do want to quote the screenwriter, Frank Darabont, called the film the best script I ever wrote and the worst movie I've ever seen. And he said, if you love it, throw your roses at Branagh's feet. If you hate it, throw your daggers in that same place. Because he's like, I have nothing to do with it. But it is faithful. It's 1994. Directed by Kenneth Branagh. It's faithful to the novel. It opens up with Captain Walton, who's played by Aidan Quinn, leading an expedition to the North Pole. Something's out there killing dogs. And then something in another direction is heading toward them, and it ends up being Victor Frankenstein. And they invite him on board, And Frankenstein goes into this lengthy story about how he got there. And somehow he also ends up telling the monster story because I guess they had met up at some point. But basically, he has this adopted sister, and he also has this like little maid named Justine who lives with them. There's sort of this weird friendship, love triangle. You know, again, I'm thinking the Shelleys and Byron and Claire Claremont, all this kind of stuff going on here. Victor's very close to his mother, and she dies in childbirth, giving birth to his brother William. Now, Kenneth Branagh is like 40 the whole way through the movie. He's supposed to be 19. It's just very odd.
Yeah.
But she dies, and he decides, Victor Frankenstein decides, I'm going to defeat death because he's so heartbroken. So he goes off to school, learns how to build this monster, ends up taking the brain of his beloved professor, played by John Cleese, to put into the monster. Immediately has regrets about building this monster, decides he's going to kill him. The monster escapes, taking Frankenstein's coat, which for some reason the coat is a whole character. Everybody comments on, oh, nice coat the whole way throughout the film. So the monster takes the coat, and in the pocket of the coat is Frankenstein's journal. So the monster learns English, just like in the book, by being in a cabin near a family, helping them out. They think this is the spirit of the woods. And then they reject him. But in the time he's there, he's learning English. He reads the journal, realizes that Frankenstein is disgusted by him and vows revenge. So he goes back, kills William, the little brother, and pins it on Justine. And the villagers immediately kill Justine. There's not even a trial. There's not even like, she doesn't even get to say a word. They just hang her immediately. And the monster goes to Frankenstein, hey, there's a nice supple body right there. You could build me a bride from Justine. That would be cool, right? So, or I'll be with you on your wedding night.
Yeah.
So Brennan's like, no, I don't want to do that. Justine, blah, blah, blah. So the monster kills Frankenstein's dad and does go a wedding night to get his bride, played by Helena Bonham Carter. And there is a weird, like he jumps on top of her in bed. There's kind of a weird thing going on. So Frankenstein takes Elizabeth's head and puts it on Justine's body, which she's doing something here. Like, if I can have them both. Tries to reanimate Elizabeth, his love. And she sees she looks like my shirt and is disgusted by it and lights herself on fire, burns down the mansion. Frankenstein, the monster, escaped. This is the end of his story, which has been so long and horrible that he dies at the end of telling the story. Like he's burned himself to death. And they build a funeral pile for him. And here comes the monster crying about, my father died. Throws his body on the pier. And then poor Aidan Quinn is like, you know what? We're going home. That guy's an asshole. And
I'm done. I'm out.
Done. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to be like him. We're going. Screw this. And the movie is just, first off, the soundtrack is relentless. It's just constant music the whole way through. And because none of the characters are sympathetic, the music's really goading you. Like, this is what you should be feeling right now. Listen to the music. It's telling you what you should be feeling instead of just letting you feel something. And it's not subtle at all. The acting is not subtle.
Hammy all the way through.
Oh my Lord. And Kenneth Branagh's running around like with no shirt on, running around this lab, lifting this body, lowering this body. What's he doing? He's running the body across the ceiling for no reason now. It's just, okay, you go ahead.
Let's talk about, because this is the main point that stuck out in my head. Let's talk about the amount of male toplessness going on in this film. So when Victor Frankenstein's mother is giving birth to William, the little brother, what's his name? Ian Holm plays the father, and he is helping the mother give birth, and there he is topless, and there's blood everywhere and blah blah blah, and the baby is like turned up the other way, and there's just blood, and I'm like, there's not that much blood in childbirth unless something terribly wrong, and there he is topless, just body fluids everywhere, and you're like, why are you topless? Why are you not wearing an apron? Surely as a doctor you know to be wearing an apron. Like, and then she's like, cut me and get the child out. It's like, no, all you have to do is just push a little. All you have to do is push a little bit more. Like, you don't have to cut. She didn't have to die. Like, no, I do not want to.
I did everything I could.
And you're like,
I just can't stop seeing Bilbo Baggins, and I'm like, Bilbo, put your shirt back on, mate. Like, there's no need for us to be seeing your chest. Stop it. And then we've got Kenneth Branagh, who, when he's animating the monster, there's sparks flying, electricity, and he's running around topless. And you're like, mate, your chest hair is going to go on fire. Put a shirt on. Like, it's just...
Like in a robe at first, too. He's got like this oriental silk robe on. I'm like, what is happening? What?
It's just Kenneth Branagh, as you said, having a midlife crisis.
Yeah. Well, did he leave Emma Thompson for Helena Bonham Carter?
He cheated on Emma Thompson, who is an angel, who is a sweet angel person. And he cheated on her during the filming of this film with Helena Bonham Carter, who, you know, I love her aesthetic, but come on. What are you doing?
There's a whole lot going on that I can't wrap my head around. What was his vision? What was he trying to achieve? Because it's just, I just don't get it. Don't get it.
It just made, I mean, you know, we could say that the death of his mother affected him and he was like, nobody will die ever again. But you still need people to die to cut up their bodies and sew them to get, like, it just doesn't make sense. No. Like, surely
his Frankenstein is not the mad scientist, not the introvert. He goes to school. I am Victor Frankenstein from Geneva, and starts beefing with the faculty. And like, if I were doing something shady, like if I had a meth lab in my home, I wouldn't be drawing all kinds of attention to myself. And and all he's doing is drawing attention to himself all over the place. It's just weird.
And let's talk about the monster. Because
De Niro.
Robert De Niro
the monster looks like De Niro, which really takes me out.
Sounds like De Niro. I mean, I don't know whether he's trying to put on an English voice, but it's this thick American Italian creature, and you're like, why, Kenneth Branagh? Why did you cast Robert De Niro?
Exactly. I wanted somebody less recognizable, less. I mean, I did like that he didn't look green with bolts in his neck. You know, he did look more like what you would picture when you read the book. But it was too much De Niro.
So De Niro. And like, I just couldn't get past it. I just could not get past it. It's not believable. The creature isn't sympathetic in the least. There's just no pathos for him at all. You're kind of like, meh.
I think he couldn't be, it was hard to be sympathetic to him because it looked like De Niro. But also because there was so much, the music, everything was at the same level of intensity.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to breathe in the film. Everything was super, super intense the entire way through that you couldn't develop any kind of sympathy. You couldn't really, it just, like I said, it felt very manipulative.
Yeah. So like, even with the death of the young child, William, who is 3 at the time, it obviously mirrors the same scene in the 1931 film with the death of Maria. But with the death of Maria, it's so peaceful before it happens. And then it happens and you're like, oh shit. Oh shit. Whereas, as you said in this film, there's no breather. So you can't get the full kind of impact of what actually just happened, that the monster did kind of snap and kill a child. He, like in the novel, it was intentional, and this one, he meant to kill William to get back at Victor. But like you said, there's no breather, so you cannot get the full emotional impact of it, and it loses that effect. And even with the death of Justine, which is a horrible death, absolute horrible, but you're still not, there's all this madness going on. You're like,
there is. Whoa. Nobody can get a word in edgewise. It's just chaos. It's complete chaos. It loses a little bit of its.
So this film, I had to do it in 2 parts because I was like, I can't get through 2 hours of this. I had to break it up, and I just couldn't get over Kenneth Branagh. I love him to pieces, but I just couldn't get over it. I couldn't.
I don't understand what he was trying to do. That's what kept me the whole way through the film. I kept thinking, like, what was his goal with this? What was he trying to achieve? 'Cause I just don't really understand it. It's just so, it reminded me a little bit of Sting and The Bride, but that you're kind of like, well, I mean, it's Sting.
Yeah.
So yeah, he is going to be running around, you know, I mean, like that's what he does.
Yeah.
But yeah, this, I mean, if Kenneth Branagh could have been subtle, toned back, maybe it would have worked a little bit better. I
kind of feel like I felt like because of the success of the Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula a few years previous, it was almost like they were trying to emulate that.
Yes, I was getting that vibe a little bit.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anywhere near as successfully handled. It just, and Kenneth Branagh is a good director too. I mean, he's a good actor, but he's also a good director. So you would think he would know.
Yeah.
I just, personal life must have gotten in the way. I think he was trying.
I think so.
Because he really did a lot with the Frankenstein Elizabeth. Like there was a lot with those two, and that they're lovers and siblings, and it was weird. But there was a lot of focus on that. I don't know if that was just his like. Yeah,
it's almost like they tried to turn it into a bit of a love story, but Frankenstein is not a love story.
No,
there's nothing romantic about it. It's a horrible film about horrible story about rejection, and you know, a narcissistic parent-like figure. And I just don't think Kenneth Branagh played that role. He shouldn't have cast himself as it. I think that's what it comes down. He shouldn't have cast himself as it, because he played it as like a romantic hero, and that's not Victor Frankenstein. So yeah, how would you recommend this?
No, and my deep apologies for suggesting. Again, I must have been high or drunk the first time I saw it, because I remember being bad, but not this bad. And I made my husband watch with me, and he's just like his chin was on the floor, and he said, Kenneth Branagh's not acting, he's performing. Like there's something, and everybody's kind of performing.
Yes.
It's too over the top for, like you said, 2 solid hours of just over the top, where you need somebody to be a little understated.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was very much as if the whole cast were competing with each other for the most kind of over the top performance. And it just, even like his friend Henry in it, Jesus, he was a bit of a drama queen. And you're like, Henry's meant to be this like sympathetic kind of, you know, he's worried about his friend, and he's worried, you know, he wants to be a good support system, but he also worries about him. Whereas like this guy was just so over the top as well.
Well,
like,
he was doing his Amadeus role.
Yes.
That was the guy who played Amadeus, and he was doing the same thing, like the funny, kitschy.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. It didn't fit.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you want to see Kenneth Branagh being absolutely ridiculous, then yes, go watch this film. If you want to see him topless constantly for no other reason, then who knows? Maybe he'd worked out that somewhere.
That was probably like the fittest he's ever been. So he really felt he's feeling himself and wanted to show, hey, fantastic. But it just is odd. It's just odd.
Yeah. And I don't think Helena Bonham Carter was the correct role.
No, and I always love her. I love her. And I always find her like very sexy and vivacious. Yeah. And she just like ran around giggling the whole film and didn't really do anything. It was just.
Yeah. And then even when she became the creature, you know, the bride, you were kind of like, oh, all right then. Yeah. Grand. You know, there was no like pain behind it. It was just like, well, that's a bit weird. That's a bit creepy. Okay. So yes, out of the 2 films, which one? It's kind of strange because like the Kenneth Branagh one, as you said, is so true to the novel. You know, it's even played out as the novel is, where it's told from the perspective of this ship's captain who is sending letters back home to his sister. So it's very true to form, but it doesn't pay homage well.
No. So I guess I would recommend, again, I'd recommend the 31 with the caveat. Understand this is not like the novel, but also understand where our cultural idea of Frankenstein's monster comes from, where that image comes from, that I can remember one of my very first Halloween costumes, I was like 3, was Frankenstein's monster. I had the mask, I had this, and I thought I was so cool in that costume, and I knew what that was as even a very small child. So watch it for that. And Boris Karloff, he's wonderful. Like, just enjoy that.
Yeah. I think I definitely recommend the Universal one over Kenneth Branagh's one, just for the impact it had on this kind of cultural icon. But
can we talk about the Penny Dreadful?
I was just about to say, let's move on.
One that I would highly recommend that.
Yes.
What a fantastic version. First of all, Victor Frankenstein is sympathetic. He is, and there is that queer lens there too.
Yes.
It's really, and the monster is very, they even take it a step further with him remembering his life and remembering having a family. And so there's like double abandonment of, would they accept me now that I'm this other? It's wonderful.
Yeah. The guy who plays Victor Frankenstein, I can't remember his name, but he plays him with such heartache and such, you just feel sorry for him. He plays him as he's addicted to morphine. He's drug addict, but he's just, the way he plays him, like he's compelled to make these scientific discoveries because that's all he has. He doesn't have family. We don't know of his family. We don't, he's never really had a love interest. And all he has is this science, and he's compelled, but it haunts him at the same time. And then just his relationship with his creations. He's like the parent that wants to be a good parent, but hasn't got the tools to do so.
Right. And
rather than outwardly rejecting his creations, he just doesn't know how to parent, basically.
You said, we don't know his family, so I don't think he's seen good parenting.
Exactly. Yeah.
He doesn't really know. And have you gotten to where he makes the bride, where he makes?
Yes.
I love her.
She's great. I just love Billie Piper's character so much.
I saw her at a Comic-Con and she's beautiful. She's just
she's fantastic. And I just love the way that he, obviously with his first creation, it did not go well, but then by his second creation, he can show that love and he can show that patience and that, and it's just heartbreaking what happens to his second creation as well. I just think it's wonderful. It's such a great portrayal. Fantastic. One of the best. I watched, so I think it's the Royal Theatre in London put on a production of Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller. And every night they swapped the roles. So one of them would play the monster, the other Victor Frankenstein. And then the next day they'd swap it. So I actually watched both of them play the roles each. As you can imagine with Benedict Cumberbatch, it's very dramatic, darling, and very, he's definitely a better Victor Frankenstein. Johnny Lee Miller is better as the creature because he's a bit more subtle with his kind of pathos, with his, his movements, whereas Benedict Cumberbatch is very, very overacting in everything he does. He is Benedict Cumberbatch, of course. But other than that, I haven't really seen many other adaptations of Frankenstein. There's a few on like Shudder and a few on Netflix that I must get round to watching, but I haven't. There was that Victor Frankenstein film with Harry Potter. What's his name? Daniel Radcliffe. I didn't watch that though.
I didn't see that. No.
But it's a shame that the novel hasn't been, apart from Penny Dreadful, it hasn't really been played or created well. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the novel has not been given a fair go?
I would hate to think because she's a woman.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy over authorship of the novel. Did she write it? Did Percy write it? Again, after reading her diaries, there's no way Percy wrote that. There's no way that it's too tied into her issues.
Life, yeah.
And he didn't pay enough attention to her to know her issues.
Yeah. I mean, when you see the kind of the reflections of, you know, she was after her mother died, she was rejected by her stepmother. And then obviously all the miscarriages and the infant losses she suffered. There's so much correlation between this story and her life that how could he have written it? Like, you know, absolutely not. And not with this, even if he had, it wouldn't have had the same pathos, the same empathy, the same emotion behind it as it does.
He didn't have that in him. No. So, I mean, I'm hoping I think there's been, in the literary world, and there's been a bit of resurgence. I mean, most colleges assign Frankenstein as a required reading. I've had to sit on several panels talking about the literary aspects of it. So I think there is a bit of, it gets attention in the literary world. Yeah. In the movie world, though, no, it really does not. And I don't know if that's because also of the Universal, because it's not scary. People aren't afraid of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So they're not going to remake it as a horror film, just like The Exorcist, because people are terrified of The Exorcist. So they're going to remake it. And, I mean, we have Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder and and that's what people think they do. Or like I said, Herman Munster, like it's just become almost a joke, I think.
Yeah.
So we're not going to see a lot of Frankenstein films, I don't think.
Yeah. And do you think of its legacy in the way of science fiction of, man versus a higher power, or, man versus nature? What do you think its legacy is in that regards?
Oh, there's definitely, I mean, all the Reanimator, Lovecraft said he did it to make fun of Frankenstein, but I don't think so. I mean, he was an asshole too.
Yeah.
There's all that Reanimator, and I still, as I said in our last podcast, one of my areas of specialty is graphic novels. There's so many graphic novels dedicated to reanimating corpses and looking at it from our perspective. As you said, Mary Shelley didn't get into a lot of the science. She didn't have it. Yeah. She didn't have science back then like we have today. So today there's a lot of looking into, can we defeat death?
Yeah.
And should that be a goal for humans? Yeah. And it really harkens back to some of the questions she had in her novel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if anyone hasn't read Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, you need to get on that, definitely. As one of the staples, as one of the roots of modern day kind of horror, I think it's absolutely important. So obviously, usually I ask people what their favorite horror film is, but I've already asked you. So I'm going to ask you to finish. What is the worst horror film you've ever seen? The one that sticks out that you're like, absolutely not. I wouldn't even recommend it. Absolutely not.
Oh my goodness. Well, see, I have a real love for creature features that a lot of people hate.
Yeah.
Like Killer Sofa.
Sorry.
About a chair that kills people. I mean, it's marvelous. It's really, it's I love Sharknado. I love things that are so bad they're good.
Right.
So that kind of, I have a little distorted view.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say it, and it's super, super unpopular. Okay. The Shining.
Okay. Right. No, I'm kind of with you on that. I'm very on the fence about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
I loved the novel. I thought the novel was terrifying. I hated the film. I just hated it. I get what he was, unlike Kenneth Branagh, I get what he was trying to do, but I do not like it. I don't find it scary. I find it annoying. I find, what's her name? Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall, yeah.
I hate her character, because she's just so passive and so, it's just, I don't care for it at all.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I kind of feel the same way. I appreciate what he was trying to do and what he was trying to say and blah, 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 blah. But I just don't think The Shining was the correct pathway to do it. You know, like, make your own film. Don't say it's, you know, a Stephen King adaptation when it's really not. Like, Stephen King's adaptation was about this, you know, hotel kind of being a haunted hotel and sucking in this family, and, you know, already using what Jack Torrance was as a human being to be even more kind of horrific, and centering Danny as the victim. Whereas in the film, you're very much like, it almost feels as if you're meant to be kind of sympathetic towards Jack Torrance's character, but you're kind of like, fuck off. You know, and all this kind of like metaphors and imagery and blah 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 blah, like, it's just too much. So
it's glaring. The way it's filmed is just so glaring to look at too. I don't find, a lot of people say, oh, The Shining was so scary. I'm like, I found the book very scary. That, like you said, the perspective of the child who has and Stephen King is just, he's amazing at this, of putting these children in dangerous situations, and the adults are either completely absent or the adults are the danger. You really just feel like, oh my God, that's so terrifying. There's nobody to hear you. There's nobody to help you. There's nobody. And, you know, and that's such a brilliant part of the novel, makes the novel so scary. And I really didn't feel it in the film.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. So thank you very much.
So that was my chat there with Elaine Pascale about two Frankenstein adaptations. So that is the Universal Frankenstein movie with Boris Karloff as the creature. And then we have Kenneth Branagh's, I don't even know how to describe it, version of Frankenstein. So yeah, they're two very, very different adaptations. As always, let us know what you think of our choices and whether you think there are any better Frankenstein adaptations out there that we should have watched and we should have talked about. So as always, you can get in touch with us on Instagram or Facebook, What a Scream Podcast. I'm on Twitter, what_scream. I'm getting a lot more better on there and talking a lot more, which is great. And we are also on Letterboxd, so you can keep up with the films that we are going to be discussing. Don't forget to catch the mini review episode that is released every Thursday, and that is where myself and my little sister chat general crap, and we also review new releases that have either come onto like Shudder or Netflix or View on Demand. So yeah, as always, I hope you are staying safe. I hope you are all okay, looking after your mental health, and stay horrific. Goodbye.